The moment I saw Amber step out of the hotel elevator, I knew something was off. She wore red, a bold, almost defiant red that shimmered under the chandeliers of the ballroom like she wanted every eye in the room on her. And she got exactly that. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even the jazz quartet seemed to lose their rhythm for a second. She looked like something out of a magazine. Sleek hair, confident posture, a flawless crimson gown that hugged her like it had been sewn onto her body. But I didn't notice the beauty first. I noticed the tag, still attached, barely visible beneath her arm when she turned. She hadn't removed it. Amber, who used to scold me for not cutting loose threads from my own shirts. Amber, who once returned a $19 blouse because it had a slight crease in the collar. No, that wasn't an accident. That was deliberate. A signal. We were at the annual New Heights Corporate Gala in downtown Chicago, hosted at the kind of venue where the drinks came in crystal glasses and the waiters judged you silently if you asked for a domestic beer. She had begged me to come. Said it would be good for me to meet more of her work circle. Said I needed to see the people she spent her life with. I remember her exact words. "I want you to feel included, James." I was already regretting it before we even sat down. Amber made her way through the crowd like she owned the place. Not walking, gliding. Her eyes scanned faces, lingering only when it served a purpose. She barely acknowledged the CEO when he passed her by, but stopped to speak to a young assistant for a full minute. She knew how to play people, how to curate attention. I used to admire that. Now it felt like watching a stranger put on a familiar skin. I followed behind her like a background character. Someone's spouse. The man with the stunning woman who smiled at everyone but him. When we finally reached our table, she didn't take the seat beside me. She slipped into the one beside Marshall. Marshall Tate. The name alone made my stomach churn. I'd met him a few times before, at office mixers in passing when I picked Amber up from work. He always had a glass of whiskey in hand and a story about Milan or Sao Paulo or someplace I couldn't afford to Google. The first time we shook hands, he didn't look at me, just smiled in Amber's direction and said, "So this is the famous James." Famous. Like I was a myth she'd managed to tame. Dinner was served. The kind of meal with ingredients you couldn't pronounce without an accent. Picked at mine. Marshall made some joke about cryptocurrency and inflation, and Amber laughed like she was in the front row of a comedy club. And then it happened. I wasn't looking for it, but I felt it. Marshall shifted in his seat. Amber's posture changed. There was a subtle movement beneath the table, and suddenly her hand jerked slightly, like she was brushing something off her leg. I didn't want to believe it, but then she stood up. Abruptly. No warning. She laughed. That same polite, detached laugh she used on nosy neighbors and baristas who got her name wrong. And then, like it was nothing, she reached into her clutch and turned toward me. "Oh, James," she said, as though we hadn't come together, as though I hadn't been sitting 3 feet away the whole time. "I almost forgot." She placed a small, rectangular box in front of me. Velvet. Expensive. The kind you keep. "For you," she said, and kissed me on the cheek. Felt rehearsed. Not affectionate. Like she was hitting her mark. Inside the box was a watch. Silver. Sleek. Modern. Way out of our budget. It wasn't something I would have chosen, and she knew that. Amber used to roll her eyes at how I'd wear the same $80 Timex for years. "You wear your watches like you wear your jeans," she once teased. Loyal to a fault. Tucked underneath the watch was a folded note. Handwritten. My name on the front in her cursive. She didn't wait for me to open it. She had already turned back to Marshall. And that was it. That was the moment I stopped pretending I didn't know. I watched her for the rest of the night, trying to act like I was still part of this world, like I belonged at that table. She moved through the event like she was starring in her own film, laughing in all the right places, posing for pictures, asking pointed questions that made people feel interesting. But she never once looked back at me. It was as if she'd already said goodbye. I sat there, the box still in my hand, the note untouched. It took everything I had not to open it right there, not to chase her down and ask what the hell was going on. But I didn't. I just watched. Marshall didn't touch her again. Not that I could see. But he didn't have to. The way they leaned toward each other said more than any hand ever could. The way she laughed at things he hadn't said yet. The way his eyes followed her when she stood to refill her champagne. This wasn't new. This was familiar. Later, while she was talking with a VP from the design department, I slipped the box into my coat pocket. It felt heavier than it should have. The band played on. People danced. Amber swayed gently to the music, wineglass in hand, like the night was something she had earned. And maybe she had, but not with me. By the time the evening ended, she'd hugged half the room, exchanged kisses on the cheek with Marshall, and turned to me with a casual, "Ready to go?" Like none of it had happened. I nodded. But I never said a word. That night, after the gala, Amber fell asleep with ease. Or maybe she just faked it well. I watched her from the edge of the bed, her back turned, shoulders still, breathing slow like waves on a quiet lake. I laid there wide awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pacing like it was late for something. The watch box sat on the nightstand. The note still untouched. I should have opened it, I know that. But part of me was scared it would confirm what I already felt in my gut. And the other part? Maybe it still hoped I was wrong. But I wasn't. Lying there, the shadows on the ceiling started morphing into scenes. Flashbacks. All the little things I hadn't pieced together until now. All the signs that had been there, plain as day, disguised as coincidences, mood swings, or just stress from work. It started about 6 months ago, I think. Right after she landed that promotion. Director of Brand Strategy, she had said, eyes bright. I'd been so proud. We'd celebrated with cheap wine and Thai takeout on the floor of our apartment because the dining table was still covered in laundry. Back then, I really believed we were in it together. But after that night, something shifted. Amber, who had once mocked gym rats and said sweat is an overrated lifestyle, suddenly developed a love for spin class. She bought new leggings, a gym bag, and one of those reusable water bottles that cost more than a steak dinner. New year, new me, she had said in January, grinning as she laced up sneakers I didn't recognize. I didn't argue. I wanted to be supportive. Who doesn't want their partner to feel good in their skin? But the workouts weren't just about health, they were about control. Structure. Escape. The first few weeks, she asked if I wanted to go with her. I declined, mostly because I hate group workouts. The music's too loud, the instructor's too peppy, and I don't like sweating in a room full of strangers. But once I said no, she never asked again. She started taking longer to get ready, curling her hair even for grocery runs, putting on perfume before walking the dog. And then came the passwords. One afternoon, I picked up her phone to check the weather, and it was locked. Face ID disabled. She had changed her passcode. Privacy is healthy, she said when I asked. You don't want to read my group chats about skincare, trust me. I let it go. I told myself not to be that guy, the jealous husband who polices his wife's phone like she's a teenager. But I also wasn't blind. I started noticing how protective she became over her devices. She used to leave her laptop open, have her browser tabs still logged into Pinterest or wedding blogs. Now it was always closed. Password protected. She never left her phone unattended, not even in the bathroom. One evening while we were watching a show, her screen lit up on the coffee table. I saw the name Monica Yoga pop up with a winking emoji in the preview. She grabbed it so fast I didn't even get a chance to read the message. I don't know anyone named Monica. Amber doesn't do yoga. I wanted to believe it was innocent. I wanted to believe a lot of things. Then came the lingerie. Lacy, delicate pieces she would leave in the laundry, tags still attached. At first, I was hopeful maybe she was reigniting the spark. But she never wore any of it around me. I'd see new bras, new sets folded into drawers like artifacts from someone else's life. She didn't even seem flustered when I pointed them out. Just felt like treating myself, she'd say, like it was a new book or a fancy moisturizer. But lingerie isn't something you buy just for yourself. Not like that. Not in secret. There were other moments too. Smaller ones. But they added up. The time I overheard her laughing on the phone at 11:30 p.m. and when I walked into the room she pretended she was scrolling Instagram. The sudden team lunches on weekends that she said were about building morale. The way she stopped asking how my day was and started answering fine before I could even finish talking. She became a version of herself I didn't recognize. Or maybe one I had never truly known. During a lunch with her friends at a rooftop spot in River North, I tagged along. I usually didn't, it felt like her space. But that time I came. They were halfway through mimosas when someone joked about relationships. One of them, Alyssa, I think, said something about how James seems like the steady one. And Amber laughed. Not a sweet laugh. A biting one. "Oh, he's steady all right," she said. "He'd probably organize our divorce papers in alphabetical order." The table erupted in laughter. I did too, nervously, because that's what you do when you've just been publicly gutted, with a smile. She didn't even glance at me. We didn't talk about it afterward. That night, she went to bed early, claiming she had a headache. I stayed up watching something stupid and loud on TV, trying to drown out the sound of my own thoughts. I knew something was happening. But when you love someone, you'll rationalize anything. You'll build walls out of denial just to keep your version of the story intact. And maybe I thought if I held on tightly enough, the truth wouldn't come loose. But it was already unraveling. The morning after the gala, she made coffee like she always did. Toasted 2 slices of bread. One with jam for me. I sat at the table in silence, trying to read her movements like a language I'd forgotten. She was humming, like the night before had never happened. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the note. I stared at it for a long time, still folded, still heavy. She noticed. "You didn't read it?" she asked, pouring milk into her cup. I shook my head. "No rush," she said, turning back to the sink. "It's nothing urgent." Her tone was light, too light. It wasn't just a note. I knew that now. It was a message, a signal, maybe even a goodbye. I finally unfolded it while she was in the shower. 3 words, written in her handwriting, small and neat like always. "You'll be okay. No love, Amber. No explanation. No apology. Just finality." I stared at those words for so long they blurred. That night hadn't been spontaneous. It had been orchestrated. The dress, the watch, the note. All of it timed. All of it meant to land a certain way. It wasn't a gift. It was a send-off. And I'd been sitting at a table, toasting champagne, pretending I still had a seat in a life that had already moved on without me. There's a moment when suspicion becomes certainty. When the gut feeling, the strange looks, the disconnected glances, when all of that finally solidifies into proof you can't explain away. For me, it came on a rainy Tuesday. 2 days had passed since the gala. Amber was back to her routine, waking early, showering with the bathroom door locked, heading out with a different tone in her voice. She wasn't cold. She was precise, controlled, like she was monitoring herself around me. I had taken the week off work, sick leave, though I wasn't actually sick in any physical sense. I just couldn't sit at my desk and pretend everything was okay. My brain wouldn't let me. I hadn't talked to anyone. Not my brother, not my coworkers. I wasn't ready for their sympathy, or their advice, or their long silences when they didn't know what to say. I spent most of my days on the couch, staring out the window, half watching the news. The watch she gave me stayed on the coffee table, face down. I hadn't worn it once. It was mid-morning when the message came in. My phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number with a short text. "You deserve to know the truth. I have something to show you." No strings, just facts. I stared at the screen for a full minute. The area code was local, Chicago. Then a follow-up came. "Check your email. Look in spam if it doesn't show up." I don't know why I listened. Curiosity, desperation. Maybe part of me wanted to believe it was some mistake, that someone had the wrong guy. But another part knew. I opened my email and scrolled straight to the junk folder. There it was. "Regarding Amber, please watch." No subject line. No body text. Just a download link and a note. This was taken the night of the gala. 9:47 p.m. balcony. Marshall and Amber. My finger hovered over the link. I hesitated. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I clicked. It was a video, grainy, clearly recorded from a distance. But it was them. The camera angle tilted slightly, probably hidden in a coat pocket or a phone held inconspicuously. I could see the curve of Amber's shoulder, her red dress unmistakable, as she leaned against the balcony railing of the event hall. The city lights stretched behind her like a stage backdrop. Marshall stood close, too close. They didn't know they were being recorded. That much was clear. Amber was smiling softly, *mately. The kind of smile I hadn't seen from her in months. And then she touched his chest. Lightly, casually, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. His hand went to her waist. He leaned in and kissed her neck. She didn't pull away. My lungs locked up. Felt like someone had poured cement into my chest. The video lasted less than a minute, but it was enough. Just before it ended, I heard their voices. Marshall, he'll open it tonight? Amber, if he hasn't already. Doesn't matter. That was the point. I closed the laptop, sat in silence, and that was it. Not a misunderstanding. Not a friend being too friendly. Not a moment taken out of context. That was confirmation. It was worse than I thought. Not because of the kiss, but because it had been choreographed. The dress, the watch, the note, all of it had been part of a plan. They wanted me to see them as innocent in public. To watch her brush him off like he was nothing. To make me feel foolish for even questioning it. And then they went out to the balcony minutes later and kissed like it was just another Tuesday night. They were counting on my silence. My passivity. I wanted to smash something. Yell. Break something glass and loud and satisfying. But I just sat there. The anger didn't come the way I thought it would. It was quieter. Deeper. Like a low burn in the center of my spine. I replayed the video once. Just once. I made myself watch it all the way through so I'd never wonder again if I'd exaggerated. Then I deleted it. But I kept the email. I needed to know who sent it. An hour later, the mystery texter followed up. I'm not looking to make trouble. But I worked with Marshall. He's scum. He did the same thing to someone else's wife last year. Just thought you should see for yourself. No name. No details. Just that. It didn't matter who they were. They had nothing to gain. No agenda. Just the truth. Amber came home that evening like nothing had changed. She brought dinner from a Thai place we used to love. Said they had new owners. Felt like a Patsy EW night, she chirped. She kissed my cheek, not noticing the way I flinched. Or maybe she did. Maybe she was just acting her part. We sat at the table. I watched her eat. She chewed slowly, wiped her mouth with a napkin, talked about the office, about a campaign launch, about the color scheme of a new website. She didn't mention Marshall. Not once. I didn't ask. I didn't say a word. Because in that moment I realized I was no longer in the same marriage. I was sitting across from someone who had already left. The body remained. The voice. The mannerisms. But the soul, the part that used to light up when she saw me, that used to grab my hand in the middle of a crowd just because I didn't know where that was anymore. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the hallway and watched her breathe. I didn't feel love. I didn't feel hate either. Just loss. Not the kind of loss that hits like a truck. The kind that creeps in slowly like fog. You don't even notice it at first. And then you realize you can't see anything around you. I went back to the kitchen and opened the drawer where we kept old letters, receipts, chargers, and things too sentimental to throw away. I pulled out the envelope she had given me at the gala. I read the note again. You'll be okay. That wasn't comfort. It wasn't kindness. It was an exit line. The kind you leave behind when you've already boarded the plane. She hadn't written it for me. She had written it for herself. 2 days after the video, Amber showed up at the diner. I'd picked up an extra shift that morning, anything to stay busy, anything to keep my mind from replaying that balcony moment like it was burned into film. I hadn't told anyone what happened. My coworkers probably just thought I looked tired. The bell above the door jingled and I looked up from behind the counter. There she was. Wearing a black pea coat, hair pulled back in a way I hadn't seen since our early days of dating. No makeup. No phone in her hand. Just a flat expression and a soft hi that didn't match the storm she'd left behind. She slid into one of the corner booths. The one we used to sit at after closing when she'd come by to bring me leftovers or keep me company. Back when she still did that kind of thing. I walked over slowly, wiping my hands on my apron, unsure of what to expect. You working a double today? She asked, like she hadn't dismantled our life in layers. Yeah, I said. Short-staffed. Figures. She looked around the place like she was seeing it for the first time. The flickering neon. The cracked leather of the booths. The jukebox that hadn't worked in 2 years. It's quieter than I remember, she said. It's the weekday lunch lull. We were talking like strangers. Like people who had once shared a life but now stood on either side of a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. She looked up at me. Do you have a minute? I hesitated. Then I nodded. I sat across from her. Folded my arms. Waited. She reached into her bag. My heart skipped for a second. I half expected another box, another note, another performance. But she only pulled out her wallet and set it on the table. I just wanted to explain, she said. I stared at her. I read the note, I said. I saw the video. Her breath caught just for a second. That was it. That tiny flicker of panic. I figured you might. You figured. She nodded slowly. I didn't want it to be like this. Like what? I asked. Real? Silence. I pressed on. You planned that night. The watch. The note. The timing. Marshall on the balcony right after you gave me a gift. You staged the whole thing. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Then opened it again. It wasn't meant to be cruel. I laughed. Bitter. Quiet. But it was meant to end something. I needed closure, she whispered. Closure. Her voice cracked. I didn't want it to turn into a fight. I thought, if I gave you something kind, if I left you with something nice, it would make it easier. I stared at her. I couldn't even form the words for a minute. You thought an expensive watch would make me not notice your hand on his chest? Her eyes dropped to the table. That's not fair. Fair? You don't get to say that word to me. I didn't mean to hurt you, James. But you knew it would. Another silence. This one stretched between us like a wire pull taut. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked finally. Why didn't you just say you were done? Why the performance? She sighed, long and slow. Because I knew if I told you to your face, you'd still try to fight for us. And I didn't want to fight anymore. I just wanted to step out clean. Clean, I repeated. You kissed another man on a balcony while wearing a dress you bought the same day. You choreographed your exit, Amber. That's not clean. That's surgical. She closed her eyes. For a moment, I saw the woman I used to know, ashamed, maybe. Or just exhausted. It started months ago, she said. At work. He wasn't supposed to be anything. Just someone to talk to. It wasn't serious. You always say that, I said. As if that makes it better. You had another life. I didn't sleep with him right away. I blinked. That's supposed to be comforting? She opened her eyes. No. Just the truth. I thought if I told you everything, even the timeline, you might. I don't know. Understand. I leaned forward. I understand this. You decided the ending without giving me a say. You wrote the last scene and made sure I was just the audience. She looked down again. I didn't know how else to do it. You do it by being honest, I said. Even when it's ugly. We sat there for a while. The jukebox clicked softly like it wanted to play a song but had nothing left to give. Eventually, she looked back up. I found a place in Rochester. What? I signed a lease last month. So you've been planning this longer than I thought. She nodded. I didn't know how to tell you. It was supposed to be a backup plan, but it wasn't. No. I sat back. Everything felt slow. Like the diner's air had thickened into molasses. You're really gone, aren't you? I said. She nodded once. I already packed most of my things, she added quietly. I just need to come back for the rest this weekend. I'll have someone with me. Marshall? I asked. She didn't answer. I stood. Then I guessed this was it. The big goodbye. I didn't want it to be cruel, she repeated. But it was. She stood too. Picked up her wallet. Slid it back into her bag. I'll leave the key in the mailbox, she said. I didn't respond. She reached out like she might touch my hand. I pulled it away. Not angrily. Just instinct. She took a deep breath and turned toward the door. As she walked out, the bell above the diner jingled again. Same sound as always. But this time it felt like something closed. I didn't watch her leave. I went back behind the counter, picked up a towel, and started wiping down the same spot again and again, trying to make something clean. I stayed at my brother's place for a few days after the diner. Told him I needed a break, a change of scenery. He didn't press. Nate had seen the look in my eyes when I showed up at his door with a duffel bag and a hollow smile. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a spare key and pointed to the guest room. He knew me well enough to let me come apart on my own time. The second night there, after he and his girlfriend had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, lights dimmed, laptop open in front of me. Not my laptop, Amber's old one. She had left it behind in our closet, buried under winter coats she never wore anymore. Probably thought it was dead. It wasn't. I didn't plan to snoop. Honestly, I wasn't even sure why I brought it. Maybe part of me just wanted proof, more confirmation that I hadn't imagined how far she'd pulled away. That it wasn't all in my head. When it booted up, I felt a twist in my stomach. The wallpaper was still a photo of us from 2 years ago, sitting on a bench by Lake Geneva. She was smiling with her sunglasses in her hair. I looked like a guy who didn't know his life was about to be rewritten. I clicked through folders at first. Nothing personal, mostly work documents, invoices, old PDFs. But there was one folder near the bottom of the drive titled Adele Projects. Amber doesn't know anyone named Adele. It was password protected. Of course it was. I tried a few guesses: our anniversary date, her dog's name, the city she grew up in. No luck. Then, on a hunch, I tried Marshall T. The folder opened. Inside were subfolders labeled with months. The earliest one dated back nearly a year. Emails, PDFs, booking confirmations. One caught my attention: lease_agreement_Rochester_Amberley.pdf. I opened it. There it was, plain as day. A fully signed lease for a 2-bedroom apartment in Rochester, dated 3 weeks before the gala. The tenant name wasn't Amberley, it was Alana Marsh. An alias. The document included her signature. Her real one. Sloppily scribbled like she was rushing to finish. She'd even used a different email address. That was next, Alana Marsh 03 followed by a provider I didn't recognize. A whole separate identity. She hadn't just been planning a breakup. She'd been planning a relocation. A reinvention. I dug deeper. Found email threads with real estate agents, a moving company, furniture stores. Even a booking for a self-storage unit. There was no mention of me. Not once. Like I didn't exist. I kept reading, jaw tight, eyes burning. A reservation for a cabin near the Finger Lakes. 2 nights. Paid in full. 2 guests. The receipt was dated the same weekend she'd told me she was off the grid for a company retreat. I brought her coffee in bed the morning she left. She kissed my forehead and told me she'd be thinking of me. I clenched my fists, held my breath, and clicked through to a document titled Rochester Checklist, Final. The list was meticulous. Contact Marshall Re, storage. Update address with HR, use AM03 email. Cancel old gym membership. Sign up for new studio downtown. Close joint bank account, wait until Monday after gala. Delete old photos from shared cloud. That last one hit me like a punch to the chest. She'd planned the deletion of our memories like it was a task on a to-do list. This wasn't a woman confused or caught up in a fling. This was someone executing an exit strategy. I sat there, staring at the screen, unable to move. I thought of the watch she gave me. The note. You'll be okay. That wasn't kindness. It was a ceremonial send-off. A soft close. I opened our old joint bank account online. She had already withdrawn half the funds. Not more. Not less. Precisely half. Like she'd rehearsed the math. The next morning, I told Nate everything. Not just about the affair, but the apartment, the alias, the layers of separation she'd been building around herself like walls in a fortress. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he asked if I wanted to smash the laptop. Eventually, I said, right now, I just want to know how long I was living next to a stranger. I went back through my memories, through the weeks, the months, all the small absences I'd made excuses for. The work dinners. The gym classes that never matched her schedule. The don't wait up texts. The way she flinched when I mentioned kids. She wasn't just slipping away, she was replacing the life we had with one that didn't include me. I kept going through the laptop over the next few days. There were photos from a new apartment. Not of her, but of rooms. Empty spaces. Light fixtures. A blank canvas. I finally opened the browser and checked her search history. Rochester co-working spaces. How to forward mail without notifying spouse. New identity, move state, no legal separation. I took *TS. Saved copies. Not out of revenge. Not to trap her. I didn't want her back. But I wanted the truth. I wanted a record. Because when someone rewrites the past, you need to protect the version that's still real. One night, I found a hidden folder inside her photos directory. Buried deep. In it were selfies. Some I'd never seen. Some taken in hotel mirrors. Outfits I didn't recognize. Backgrounds I couldn't place. She looked different. Not happy. Not sad. Just detached. Like someone in between lives. It was like watching a ghost try on different faces. I closed the folder. Shut the laptop. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt freedom. Not the exhilarating kind. Not yet. But a cold clarity. A new baseline. Amber had already begged * in her new chapter. I was just catching up to the last line of mine. She didn't leave because of one mistake. Or a rough patch. She left because she wanted a life that I wasn't in. And she built it carefully, secretly, one encrypted folder at a time. By the time Amber returned to the house to collect the rest of her things, I'd already moved emotionally into a different space. She walked through the door like a guest, polite, purposeful, detached. I didn't speak much. She didn't linger. She was efficient, like someone finishing up a transaction. The one thing she left behind? A storage box full of old tech, dead chargers, a broken tablet, and a cracked external hard drive that hadn't been touched in years. I almost tossed it, but something told me not to. I spent that night sitting on the living room floor with a toolkit prying open the shell of that hard drive like it held a secret. It did. Once I got it running on Nate's old desktop, I found an archive folder marked with nothing more than a date, April, JBR. I didn't recognize the initials. They weren't mine. They weren't Marshall's either. Inside were photos, videos, and dozens of *TS. Conversations mostly. One thread stood out, a messaging exchange labeled Bryce. I scrolled. Amber, flight lands at 4. Meet me at the dock. Bryce, wouldn't miss it for the world. Got us the same suite. Amber, I'll wear the black one. Bryce, you always know how to *LL me. Every word made my chest tighten, but I kept reading. The messages spanned months. Maybe longer. They were woven between business trips, girls' weekends, and the days she claimed to be working late. There were pictures too. Her in hotel mirrors. On patios. At the beach. One stood out, Amber sitting on a lakeside dock, legs tangled around a man I'd never seen before. His face half-turned, hers pressed against his cheek. They looked at peace. I recognized the background. She had told me she was in Miami with coworkers that weekend. The weather had been terrible, she'd said. But in this photo, the sun was golden, the water perfectly still. A lie layered on a lie. I cross-checked the date. It matched the weekend I had come down with the flu and she hadn't returned my calls. Said the reception at the Airbnb was awful. That she'd left her charger at the office. I remembered texting her from the bathroom floor, feverish, asking her to call when she could. She replied the next morning with, "Sorry, babe. Long day. Hope you're feeling better." Nothing else. The timeline was unmistakable. While I was curled up with a blanket and a bottle of Dayquil, she was wrapped in someone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, eyes open in the dark, wondering just how many versions of Amber there had been. Marshall had been the polished exit plan. But Bryce was something else. He was the fantasy. I wasn't just replaced. I was divided. Compartmentalized. Different men for different needs. Work world image, Marshall. Escape world thrill, Bryce. And me? I had become the placeholder. The home base she returned to between performances. I spent the next few days quietly piecing things together. A private investigator wasn't something I ever thought I'd hire, but by then, I needed more than fragments, I needed a full picture. I needed to know where my reality had been edited. The investigator worked fast. And what he uncovered? Amber and Bryce weren't a passing affair. He wasn't some one-time vacation fling. They had met nearly a year before the gala at a conference in Denver. She had told me the trip was exhausting. Said she didn't get to see any of the city. Claimed she spent most of her time in breakout sessions. She had actually spent 2 nights with him at an Art Deco hotel in Lodo. The same hotel she later recommended for our anniversary trip. There were hotel bills, restaurant charges, flight itineraries under different names. He was listed in her phone as Bethany, spin class, the same Bethany who had supposedly introduced her to hot yoga. Her deception wasn't careless. It was surgical. I asked the investigator how long he thought it had gone on. At least 10 months, he said. Maybe longer. They got good at hiding it. He paused before continuing. He's married too. Wife's name is Julie. 2 kids. Lives in Waukegan. The knot in my chest twisted. I've seen this kind of pattern before, the investigator said. 2 people caught in something too big to maintain, so they rotate partners like pieces on a board. Keeps the heat down. So I wasn't the only one, I said quietly. No, he said. And probably not the first either. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something shifted inside me. Not a crack. More like a separation. Like I'd finally detached from whatever illusion had been holding me in place. The next day, I found Julie. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't looking to stir chaos. But I needed someone who understood. Someone who could fill in the gaps. We met at a coffee shop in Evanston. Neutral ground. She arrived 10 minutes early, nervous, I scanning the room. When I introduced myself, she didn't hesitate. Just nodded, pulled out a manila folder, and set it between us. Photos. Statements. Calendars. Our timelines overlapped in places so precisely it made my skin crawl. The same weekends. The same stories. While Amber had been telling me she was at a workshop in Milwaukee, she was in Bryce's rental house in Michigan. Julie showed me a selfie from the living room. Amber in the background, half-dressed, unaware she was in the frame. I didn't know how deep it went, Julie said. I thought it was just texting. Until one of our kids found her necklace in the laundry room. We sat in silence for a while. I'm not trying to ruin their lives, she added. I just want out. Clean. She paused. You? I just want the truth, I said, and I had it now, in all its bruising clarity. A few weeks later, I saw Amber again. Not in person. By accident. I had gone to a gallery in Madison. Nate's girlfriend was showing some pieces. I was walking through the space when I saw her. She was standing a few feet away, admiring a painting, wearing a black dress, wine glass in hand. Alone. She didn't see me. I stayed in the shadows, half obscured by a pillar, and for a moment I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, no grief, just a quiet finality, like the last page of a book you no longer needed to reread. She turned toward another piece, unaware I had ever been there, and I let her go, not with a fight, not with words, but with silence. And sometimes, that's the loudest thing you can leave behind.